This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Africa suspends the use of Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine hours after the U.S. flags its possible link to blood clots. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is set to visit China ahead of President Biden's virtual climate summit. And rural communities in Uganda enhance access to clean water using solar-powered digital systems. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on this program, Egypt's central bank cautions investors on the use of the volatile Bitcoin. And alarm is raised over rising cases of illegal stripping of barks from trees in South Africa. South Africa has suspended its rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The Ministry of Health announced the decision on Tuesday. This comes after reports emerged in the U.S. of rare blood clots forming in 6 vaccine recipients. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has opened an investigation on the matter. South Africa had administered over 200,000 doses of the vaccine to its health workers. Meanwhile, U.S. health authorities are recommending a pause in the use of Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine. Government experts are investigating reports that several women developed blood clots after they were given the single-shot vaccine. Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
At vaccination centres across the U.S. on Tuesday, doses of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine stayed in the fridge as regulators launched an investigation. They're looking into the cases of 6 women who've developed rare blood clots after getting the J&J vaccine. That's 6 people out of almost 7 million who've received doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the US so far.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
President Biden's chief medical advisor highlighted exactly that at a briefing at the White House.
I think this is an unusual occurrence of a serious adverse event that you want to make sure before you go forward, you investigate it thoroughly. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're pausing so that they can look at it more carefully.
The COVID-19 response coordinator insisted the pause will have a minimal impact, given the J&J vaccine only makes up 5% of total doses administered so far.
The president has always said that this is a wartime effort. We're at war against the virus. And as such, we've mobilized a wartime effort so that we're prepared for a wide range of scenarios.
After the US pause was announced, Johnson & Johnson immediately delayed the rollout of its vaccine in Europe. The European Medicines Agency says it's not clear there's a link between the blood clots and the vaccine, but it's investigating. After reports of blood clot incidents among people who've received the AstraZeneca vaccine, European governments have introduced a variety of age restrictions. US regulators say this pause is only likely to last for a matter of days, but it could still slow down the country's vaccination effort. Polls in Europe show public confidence in AstraZeneca's vaccine has taken a hit, and the same could happen with Johnson & Johnson's here in the US. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
The Chinese government has donated 200,000 Sinopharm vaccine doses to Cameroon. Cameroonian authorities, while receiving the consignment on Monday, thanked China for its support in the fight against COVID-19. CGTN's Wanja Mungai has more on this story.
This is the first batch of vaccines to land in the Central African country. Cameroonian health officials received the 200,000 doses at the Yaoundé-Nzemalaine International Airport. Ambassador Wang Yingwu handed over the donation to Cameroon's Health Minister Manuda Malachi. Malachi was also among the first people to get the shot.
Today is a great day for Cameroon and for its health staff. We thank the President of the Republic, but especially we thank China, which has kindly made its vaccines available to us. The priority objective is to protect health personnel who have been on the front line since the beginning of this pandemic.
Malachi called upon citizens to take the jab, especially citizens identified as a priority.
I'm glad I got the vaccine, especially since the minister set an example. I think that his example will reassure the Cameroonian people and will lead them to be vaccinated.
Cameroon is among African countries that have experienced a surge in infections lately. So far, it has recorded approximately 62,000 cases and close to 1,000 deaths. That's according to Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Well, the issue of vaccine passports has sparked debate across the world. In Africa, there are fears it would hamper movement for a majority of people. Robert Nagila reports from Nairobi.
After months of uncertainty, there was renewed optimism in March this year as Africa's COVID-19 vaccination rollout gathered momentum with vaccines from the COVAX facility and vaccine aid from China. But just last week, the World Health Organization said the continent had administered only 2% of more than 690 million vaccine doses globally, even as debate raged on across world cities over vaccine passports. The first vaccination certificates were adopted in 1951 against yellow fever, smallpox and cholera. Known as yellow certificates, it was a requirement for international travel in and out of particular countries. Today, one only requires proof of vaccination for yellow fever, but there were some challenges.
It is paper-based, and confirmation, there was no system of confirming that that particular certificate was genuine.
To avoid issues of forgery, the Africa CDC is working with partners to come up with an electronic vaccine passport. It is downloaded onto a phone, verified using a QR code to a database currently being built. But with only 13 million vaccine doses administered across 43 countries in Africa, there are fears a vaccine passport against COVID-19 could hamper movement for a majority of Africans.
A COVID certificate today will be a big disadvantage to those of us who live and work in Africa, because there are very few people who have actually been vaccinated for COVID-19 on the continent.
CDC Africa says for vaccine passports to work in Africa, 3 things need to happen: vaccine availability, capacity building, and education to avoid vaccine hesitancy. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's return to our headline story, where South Africa has paused the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine over safety concerns. The move follows the decision by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration to temporarily suspend the use of the jab. This comes after reports emerged in the U.S. of rare blood clots forming in 6 vaccine recipients. CGTN's Julie Shire has more details.
Close to 300,000 South African healthcare workers have received the Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 jab without severe side effects or clotting. But the health ministry is taking no chances after reports of severe clotting in 6 female patients in the US after taking the single-shot vaccine.
We have determined to voluntarily suspend our rollout until the causal relationship between the development of clots and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is sufficiently interrogated. Our scientists are confident that the FDA decision is only a precautionary basis, and we expect that this will not result in the complete withdrawal of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Scientists are keeping a close watch on those who already received the jab.
We need to continue to observe. Safety of our participants are important, and anyone who presents with a thromboembolic event in our study, we will investigate. It's important to note that we have seen these rare thrombotic events in other vaccines.
When we roll it out, it goes to millions of people. And when you roll it out to millions of people, you have to be able to not only look for safety signals, but you also have to be able to say, is that safety signal actually to do with the vaccine? Or is it just because things happen when you roll out things to millions of people? You know, health issues do arise. And this is what's called the causality assessment. You really are looking to say, is this really associated with the vaccine, or is it just sheer chance because we're pushing this out to so many people?
Minister Zweli Mkhize reaffirmed the country's commitment to fighting COVID-19. 60 million vaccine doses have been secured and will soon start trickling in. Mkhize is confident the pause will not derail second phase rollout plans likely to start in May.
In the extremely unlikely event that Johnson & Johnson rollout is completely halted, we will not have any impediment to proceed with phase 2 of our rollout with Pfizer. We don't, however, anticipate that the Johnson & Johnson will be halted permanently. We believe it's a matter that will be cleared in a matter of days. We are confident that our rollout of Johnson & Johnson will resume, and so with the 30 million doses of Johnson & Johnson, as well as the 30 million from Pfizer secured, we now have enough doses to exceed the 40 million target we had set for the year.
South Africa's COVID-19 infection rate has slowed significantly since the second wave subsided, but it remains the worst hit country on the continent and is still vulnerable to a third wave if vaccinations aren't rapidly boosted. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is set to visit China from Wednesday to Saturday. He will meet his Chinese counterpart in Shanghai with joint efforts on climate change high on the agenda. It comes ahead of President Biden's virtual climate summit next week, in which he's likely to outline U.S. goals for cutting emissions by 2030. Last year, then-President Donald Trump took the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, the only country to quit the accord. It rejoined under President Biden in February. John Kerry will be the first official in the new administration to come to China. The envoy will also visit South Korea. South Korea says it will petition the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea over Japan's decision to release tons of treated contaminated water into the ocean. Seoul adds it will relay the concerns to the International Atomic Energy Agency and step up its own radiological measuring and monitoring. Joseph Kim reports.
South Korea expressed serious concerns about Japan releasing contaminated water from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear plant into the sea. The government says the decision could impact the safety of the South Korean people and the surrounding environment.
The government expresses strong regret over the Japanese government's decision to release contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear station into the sea.
Japan says the first release will take place in about 2 years and will meet international standards endorsed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. South Korea's foreign ministry responded by calling in Japan's ambassador to lodge a formal protest. Being one of Japan's closest neighbors, worries are mounting around South Korea, particularly from those in the fishing industry.
It's irresponsible of Japan to make a unilateral decision. Discharging the wastewater could directly harm and have a direct impact on our bodies. I believe what Japan is doing is wrong.
As a Korean, I'm worried because of how close we are. We were already concerned with radiation, but if the release of wastewater is going to further stoke fears.
An alliance of more than 24 civic groups are also protesting the decision. They say they'll do everything in their power to prevent what they call nuclear terrorism.
There are still high amounts of radioactive material inside Fukushima's contaminated water, and tritium is a material that can be measured properly if it is released into the ocean. This would cause severe pollution. The South Korean government needs to consider banning all seafood from Japan.
In addition, some analysts say Fukushima's waters contain significant amounts of other isotopes despite years of treatment.
International and local environmental groups also question TEPCO's plans because there is a high level of distrust of the company following years of leaks, spills, malfunctioning equipment, and safety breaches. And so the South Korean government is calling for the transparent disclosure and international verification of the treatment process, saying it will take every necessary measure to putting its people's safety first. Joseph Kim for CGTN, Seoul.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Benin's incumbent president, Patrice Talon, secures a second term in office. And alarm is raised over rising cases of illegal stripping of barks from trees in South Africa.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
In West Africa, at least 20 nursery school children have been reported to have died at a school in Niger's capital of Niamey. Officials say the miners were trapped in a fire that broke out in their school located in Pays-Bas neighborhood. The school has a total of 800 pupils, and the deceased miners were among the few that could not scale the wall to escape. According to the local teachers' union, the cause of the fire is still unknown. Benin's President Patrice Talon has secured a second term. Provisional results show he garnered just over 86% of the vote. Opposition leaders had called for a boycott of the polls. They accused Talon of pushing election laws which disqualified his main rivals, with some claiming to have been forced to leave the country. The current administration denied the charges. According to the country's electoral commission, a voter turnout of around 50% was recorded.
Le duo de candidats.
Presidential candidate Patrice Talon and his running mate Mariam Talata obtained the absolute majority of votes cast in the first round.
We have also noted that images and audio related to fraud and ballot box stuffing are circulating on the same social networks. Given the seriousness of these facts, Sena has already taken initiatives to conduct thorough investigations to find out where these facts occurred and who the perpetrators are.
South Sudan's government says it is working to speed up reforms in the country's security sector. This comes at a time when the UN mission in South Sudan has announced its plans to reduce troop numbers by 7% next year.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan says relative peace has now returned to the country. It announced a plan to shift its focus from protecting civilians who were fleeing the 6 years of violence to peace-building efforts. The UN has now handed over displaced people's camps to South Sudan's government.
As I said when I came to South Sudan, our success will be measured by the downsizing of our presence. That has started. Over the coming year, there will be a reduction of our military and police peacekeepers by around about 7%.
There are currently 17,000 UN troops and 2,000 police officers in South Sudan.
South Sudan's government says reforming the security sector is the major challenge it faces. The reforms were scheduled to be carried out before formation of the unity government, but more than a year after the new government is formed, the security sector is not yet reorganized.
A peace deal signed in 2018 outlined how security sector reforms should be undertaken in South Sudan. The former rival armed forces are to be unified, retrained and redeployed. They are now unified, stationed in 17 camps across the country, but they are yet to be redeployed. South Sudan's government says it is working to expedite the peace process.
We need a stronger, unified security sector. According to the letter of the agreement, this time around, for us to fix the security sector of South Sudan, we need to have a professional national security sector, a non-partisan one that is representative of the diverse faces of South Sudan, regional diversity, ethnic diversity in that force.
South Sudan's government says the planned reduction of the number of UN peacekeepers shows that lasting peace is about to return to the country. However, many here remain unsure of that, arguing that the implementation of the peace deal has been slower than earlier expected. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The closure of South Africa's national parks during COVID-19 lockdowns has led to a significant drop in cases of wildlife poaching. But Sun Parks, the body which manages the Table Mountain National Park, says it is concerned about an alarming increase in illegal bark stripping of trees in forests near Cape Town. Renee Delcam has more on that story.
Bark stripping is the partial or complete removal of the external layer of a tree. And experts say the illegal axing or cutting of trees is a growing problem in the Newlands Forest, the largest forest near the city of Cape Town.
The crime itself is it's quite serious in that it's got a devastating impact on the tree species itself. It basically results in a potentially fatal wound to the tree where it's not able to recover and resprout.
If these trees are being targeted consistently and harvested illegally, we will be faced with tree species that will be listed as vulnerable and endangered.
It's actually quite devastating coming across a tree that's been stripped and left to die in the forest. It feels a bit like finding a poached animal in the bush.
Rangers recently arrested a group of suspects who are now facing criminal charges.
Myself and a colleague arrested 3 suspects in possession of 59 kilograms of indigenous tree bark, which we were able to link to the Newlands area of Table Mountain National Park. They used a sharp implement, which we found in one of the bags where there was bark.
Tree bark is commonly used for the production of traditional medicine in South Africa, which has led to the over-exploitation of many indigenous tree species.
Yes, it is a tree, but it does have an important role in our human society. I mean, if you just take a breath, that is where that comes from. It's the oxygen from the trees. And if we wipe out this forest by continuing with this illegal activity, we would face serious repercussions in the forest.
As much as technology will advance and as much as society will advance, we still need to come back home to conservation and to nature. It's what people are drawn to, it's what we use as therapy, it's how we recharge.
Experts in the Newlands Forest say they use an organic paste of cow manure to return nutrients to the wounded trees.
It takes years for them to grow to this stage. So we have to start planting now to get the forest back to its original state.
Rangers say they love seeing hikers enjoy the unique peace and tranquility of the Newlands Forest, and they've warned people not to purchase tree bark from conservation criminals, as that will lead to further destruction of forests. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
A Tunisian entrepreneur has turned to organic farming by growing edible flowers. The journalist turned farmer says she's surprised by the appetite for her homegrown product in the North African country and hopes to see a new culinary culture bloom. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi visited her farm in Tunisia's Tabarka region and filed this story.
Sonia Ibidi has lived in many Arab countries, where she worked as a journalist and a reporter for an international tourism magazine for several years. The 43-year-old entrepreneur returned home and invested all her savings in this land 4 years ago. Since then, it has become the first farm for edible flowers in Tunisia. It is located in the Yellow Lake village in the region of Tabarqa, northwest of the country.
At the beginning, some locals thought I was crazy for eating flowers because it's not part of their menu or cuisine in this rural region. Then they joined me to work the land and grow the flowers. That's how they discovered the importance of flowers for nature and started promoting this exceptional product.
Sonia picked some fresh flowers for me to eat and enjoy. It's a unique experience, but the taste is familiar. I would say it's like an organic salad. Sonia says her edible flowers have many health benefits. In fact, the production, distribution and consumption of flowers in Tunisia has increased since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year.
The flowers I picked and chose to grow in this farm have a good taste and smell that Tunisians like. I started with 5 or 6 seeds which I planted in pots. For example, capuchin flowers contain vitamin and boosts the immune system, especially during the pandemic.
Sonia believes in social economy in rural areas. The entrepreneur supports women in this mountainous region. Her business has created dozens of permanent jobs, as well as 30 seasonal jobs during the spring season. I joined Sonia and some of her employees over lunch, and we discussed the positive impact of the farm on their lives. Sonia calls these women her sisters and business partners, while they describe her as the strong and courageous flower lady. Rauda was born and raised in this rural area. The 45-year-old farmer says work has empowered women and changed the lives of their families.
I have 3 kids at school. I grow flowers to buy books and pay for their education. It's a decent job. As a rural woman, I feel free and independent when I work on the farm. Here, I earn a living and I can offer a better future for my children.
The entrepreneur developed a business model based on domestic production and export to the international market. In the meantime, Sonia succeeded in creating a local market. Many prestigious restaurants and 5-star hotels are buying more than 40 flower varieties.
Growing flowers is an adventure and is a very challenging activity. I continue to research and to learn from nature every day. I'm proud of having created the first market for edible flowers in Tunisia and the region. I hope more people will follow my path.
In addition to edible flower farming, Sonia has planted a large quantity of strawberries. She is selling both the fruit and the leaves, which can be used for herbal teas. The entrepreneur now plans to launch an online platform to sell her farm produce to the whole world. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tabarqa, Tunisia.
Egypt has moved to strengthen its security ties with several African nations. It recently announced it had signed a military agreement with Burundi to boost security cooperation and intelligence sharing. That announcement came just a few days after Egypt signed a memorandum of understanding with Uganda that enables enhanced military cooperation between the two nations. Adil Mahrouri has more details.
In March, Egyptian and Sudanese military chiefs of staff signed a cooperation agreement. It aims to boost joint defense programs and also sets the framework for the sharing of military intelligence. This month, Cairo announced similar intelligence and military cooperation agreements with Uganda and Burundi, making it clear that the North African country is applying a new military vision for Africa based on greater cooperation on security matters.
The military and intelligence cooperation has come about to face big regional developments. All these nations face the threat of terrorism. Military cooperation will increase the capabilities of these nations. Egypt is also keen to increase cooperation with these countries, as they could empower Egypt's position in the Grand Renaissance Dam talks.
The Uganda People's Defense Forces says the agreement signed was between its Chieftaincy of Military Intelligence and the Egyptian Intelligence Bureau. Cairo considers this development a great shift in its ties with Kampala. Uganda has historically opposed Egypt's policy regarding the building of projects along the River Nile. Relations have, however, improved in recent years, and in 2014, Egypt established a representative military office in Kampala.
Since President el-Sisi took office in 2014, Egypt managed to develop diplomatic ties with African states. Cooperation in all fields has been enhanced. The military cooperation agreement is a result of these efforts. I think these recent developments highlight the success of Egypt's African foreign policy.
Burundi's agreement marked its first military committee meeting with Egypt in Cairo last Saturday. The military agreements promise expansion in joint military exercises, which developed significantly after Egypt signed its first African military cooperation agreement this year with Sudan. All three countries are Nile Basin nations. The selection is intentional. For decades, Cairo has not paid much attention for its African neighbors. But since the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam talks tension sparked in 2011, Egypt has been investing heavily to restore ties with its continental partners. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And here's a quick recap of our headlines at this hour. South Africa has paused the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine over safety concerns. The move follows the decision by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, to temporarily suspend the use of the jab. This comes after reports emerged in the U.S. of rare blood clots forming in 6 vaccine recipients. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is set to visit China from Wednesday to Saturday. He'll meet with his Chinese counterpart in Shanghai, with joint efforts on climate change high on the agenda. It comes ahead of President Biden's virtual climate summit next week, in which he is likely to outline U.S. goals for cutting emissions by 2030. And Benin's President Patrice Talon has secured a second term. Provisional results show he garnered just over 86% of the vote. Opposition leaders had called for a boycott of the election. They accused Talon of pushing election laws which disqualified his main rivals. The current administration has denied the charges. And that's a look at your top headlines. It's now time for your business news. Here's what's coming up. Egypt's central bank cautions investors on the use of the volatile Bitcoin.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt's central bank has renewed its warnings against dealing in cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. The Apex Bank said that there is a high risk involved in dealing in cryptocurrencies as they are dominated by instability and extreme volatility in the value. Yasser Hakim has more in this report from Cairo.
The use of virtual currency is quickly growing worldwide. It's increasingly being adopted and traded in some stock markets and accepted by some central banks and companies as a usable currency. However, Egypt's central bank believes it's too unsafe to be released in the North African country.
The ban is due to the fact that it is a virtual currency without any base. No nation owns it, and it has no financial assets. It could widely be used in money laundering and shady trading. It facilitates some illegal operations that could be otherwise detected within the formal banking system. This is the main concern of the Egyptian Central Bank. And not only virtual currencies are banned, but even the forex trade is prohibited because it can also be used in money laundering.
In spite of cryptos being accepted in major economies, most experts believe it will take time for digital currencies to take a foothold in Egypt.
The banking sector is run by old-school traditional executives. There must be a major shift in approach to accept this new idea. If you are offered a virtual wallet with digital currencies to purchase goods, you will not believe it. There must be social change, awareness campaigns, and flexibility from banking leaders. There can be quick steps that lead to a fast transition, but I don't expect it to take place at the moment. Maybe in 10 years or so.
For now, the central bank has made it clear there will be punishment for anyone dealing in the digital currency market. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Ghana's economy is set to benefit from a $3 billion loan that the government has raised from the international debt markets. The overall target is to borrow $5 billion this year to supplement the West African nation's budget deficit. Economists, however, are concerned about the country's rising debt levels, now at 76% of GDP. With the details, here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai.
Business has started picking up for Solomon Bulawa. The demand for stationery has increased as schools and businesses reopen in Ghana after months of shutdown due to the coronavirus pandemic.
The income you expected to have, you are not getting it. Offices were not purchasing, schools were not purchasing, so normally we're even at home, you are not even coming at all.
Like Bulawa, many traders in Ghana are trying to recover from the disruptions caused by COVID-19. The government has secured a $3 billion loan from the international debt market to support economic growth. Ghana's currency, the cedi, depreciated by 4% against the US dollar last year. Analysts say the loan will help shore up the central bank's foreign exchange reserves.
The cedi is not strong when it comes to other exchange in terms of the US dollar. So with $3 billion coming in, obviously in the short to a bit of medium term, we can have a bit of currency stabilization in terms of the cedi. And that is also very key for every business or every economic activity in the country.
Ghana's federal loans have received public backlash, and economists are concerned about the country's rising debt, which is at 76% of GDP. The IMF has projected Ghana's debt to hit 86.6% by 2025.
As it is now, the government is paying debt that was raised, probably not during their time, but in the previous administration, and they are paying. Government is a going concern. But the point is the investment of this money. How are we investing it? Is it always going to be invested in paying recurrent expenditure, or we are investing in productive sectors that in itself will generate revenue for the economy? I think that is where the key link is for us going forward.
The government plans to use the loan to pay off some of its debts, as well as fund infrastructure developments, including building of roads and hospitals. Ghana aims to borrow a total of $5 billion from the international debt markets this year. The government says the $3 billion loan acquired so far shows that investors are confident in the Ghanaian economy. Aside from pumping the economy with the $3 billion loan, the government has also introduced new taxes this year to increase internal revenue generation. But some small traders like Solomon Bulawa say the taxes are making life more difficult in the short term.
Things are really going to be a little bit tough. So if government does not really step out with its import duty, we are really going to have a serious crisis on our head.
Ghana is targeting a GDP growth of 5% this year. The government says it expects a rapid economic recovery as it further eases restrictions with the rollout of COVID-19 vaccination. And as his business expands, Solomon Bulawa hopes to restock more stationery in his shop. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The G20 countries, a group of rich nations and big emerging powers, have further extended their debt service suspension till December this year. The G20 countries had established the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which took effect in May of 2020. This was aimed at helping countries concentrate their resources on fighting the coronavirus pandemic and safeguarding lives. Africa's largest economy is one of the countries set to benefit from the extension. Correspondent CGTN said Deji Badmus responds on the likely impact the extension could have on Nigeria's economy.
With the Nigerian economy taking a big hit from the COVID-19 pandemic and the fall in oil price, the extension of the debt service suspension till December could not be coming at a better time. It would at least provide some reprieve for a country just coming out of recession.
For me, I call it forbearance or probably shifting the evil day, but of course it gives us some kind of leeway to be able to use the monies we would have used in servicing the loans to get into some other economic recovery efforts by the government. So it's a good thing that is happening, but I wish they could extend it a little more so that forbearance can just sustain countries like ours.
What it basically could do is to free up funds for other developmental uses. But for me, from an analytical point of view, the question has always been some of this accumulation of debt we've seen over time. Where is the money going to? How much, when we talk of effectiveness, how much of these monies are being used effectively and efficiently to support economic development in the country?
Nigeria's debt level has been a major talking point in the country for quite a while. As at December last year, the country's total debt portfolio stood at over $86 billion. A quarter of the country's budget for this year is dedicated to debt repayments. And with its revenue badly depleted, the government has to borrow even more to fund the budget.
The level of borrowing is not unreasonable, it's not high. The problem we have is that of revenue. So what we need to do is to increase our revenues to be able to enhance our debt service obligation capacity.
The government has taken measures like tax reforms and diversification of its income streams in order to boost its revenue. But it would take some time before the measures yield tangible results.
If we think we are not generating enough revenue to be able to cover some levels of our deficit, I expect as an individual that our expenditure pattern will change. Our spending pattern should change, and the cost of governance should reduce.
If we say we will not borrow, and therefore we will not build rails and major infrastructure until our revenue rises enough, then we will regress as a country, we will be left behind, we won't be able to improve our business environment, and our economy will not grow.
The extension of the debt service suspension initiative may not end Nigeria's borrowing, but it would at least give the country a chance to use whatever it would have used in servicing its debts to revitalize an economy that needs all the help it can get. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Small-scale horticulture farmers in Zimbabwe have been encouraged to secure markets before they begin a production. This is in order to avoid being held ransom by middlemen who end up paying them unfair prices for their produce. From Harare, CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya explores the plans being made to level the playing field and empower farmers.
Rusitu Valley was the epicenter of Cyclone Idai in 2019. The area is renowned for fruit growing, and that's helping the community recover from the devastation. Pineapple farmers here are on the verge of getting certification to export their produce to Europe. Foreign currency earnings will help offset shortfalls they have suffered to some unscrupulous local traders.
Since 2011, I've been selling to traders who come with their own prices. Since there's no set price, we end up relying on individual negotiating skills. Having a gazetted price would help us forecast how much we're going to earn even before we harvest.
Because their produce is perishable, time is often not on their side and they end up being held ransom.
We are getting 20 cents per kilogram, which is very low. It's not enough to meet our daily needs. We would want a much higher price.
The farmers' predicament arises from an awareness gap, according to those trying to get them a better deal.
What we are saying to the farmers is that before you go into production, make sure that there is an off-taker for whatever you are going to produce. So specifically for the farmers that you are referring to, their experience is that you produce. When it comes to the marketing season, you are now looking for takers, and you are under pressure because some of the commodities are perishable.
The authority has also intensified training on market requirements such as quality, size and variety, and that's helped some of the small-scale growers break into previously exclusive retail chains.
What that is done, I think at country level, is that we've seen a reduction in imports of certain commodities that are produced locally. But all this is through identifying farmers that are producing a certain commodity, then linking them up with the takers of that commodity at the right price.
Farmers have also been encouraged to make juice, jams and can their produce, which will not only give it a longer lifespan, but also increase returns. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. Rural communities in Uganda enhance access to clean water using solar-powered digital.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Uganda, many rural communities still face challenges in getting water. Only 68% of rural villages have access to safe water, to a safe water source, according to the Ministry of Water. Now, a non-profit organization is helping rural communities access clean and reliable water using solar-powered digital systems. Isabel Nakiria has more details.
Christine Nachibuka now taps water with a swipe. She's using a digital system that involves loading credit on a token and passing it through a payment system to allow water to flow. Residents pay 2 cents for a 20-litre jerrycan of water, which they say is affordable.
They really helped us. We are no longer suffering. We don't even think about having to walk down the well to fetch water.
Christine's family and millions more live in Uganda's water-stressed areas. She says life was tough before water was brought close to her home.
Imagine we used to walk up this hill very early before we go to school every day, yet we would take 2 routes. Sometimes we ended up being late for school.
According to the Water Ministry, only 38% of the people in Christine's district of Sembabule have access to clean water. This water source has for years been used by both humans and animals. It's not only safe for drinking, but it's also far off. People have to walk over 2 kilometers to access it. The government drilled boreholes in the area, but many broke down. Water Campus, an NGO working to improve access to water in rural communities, is modernizing the broken boreholes. It's replacing hand pumps with solar-powered pumps and supplying cheap water closer to where people live.
We also use a solar-powered digital payment system so that people receive an individual token that they can load credit onto, so that at any time during the day or night they can come and collect water without having to disturb anyone to turn on a tap or have to travel far down to a hand pump.
The organization has built 3 water systems in 3 districts so far, each costing $30,000. The project leaders say the system is reliable and residents are assured of constant water supply throughout the year. The climate in Zimbabwe is semi-arid, meaning not much rain is received here. The community in Christian's village is lucky, but millions more still don't have access to clean and safe water. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Zimbabwe, Uganda.
And your sports news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Chelsea and PSG advance to the UEFA Champions League semi-finals.